All right, welcome everybody. My name's Scott Maier. This is Drawing Together with Artists Network. It's Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern, where we draw together, and I'm very happy to be back. It feels like it's been forever. I think it kind of has. So welcome back. It's good to be drawing back with everybody. I hope you all had a great week last week. For those of you in the U.S. who celebrated Thanksgiving, I had a fantastic one, and I hope you did as well. And on the note of Thanksgiving, I want to show my gratitude for all of you who have been with me throughout this show. We're on episode 122. And as you can see, I pinned at the top of the chat the link to my new book, which is now available for pre-order on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And I want to express how grateful I am that you all have stuck with me and helped me really build this together, because that's really what led to the book. All of these thoughts about drawing and teaching have been swirling around in my head in various iterations as an instructor, and taking the time to draw with you every week has helped me to really help kind of hone those ideas and lead into that book. So it's all about kind of taking what we've built here and putting it into print. The idea that we build our artistic practice by challenging ourselves in particular ways and moving forward one step with every project that we do. Because that's what we do as artists. We don't learn in a linear progression where we take the fundamentals and we get to the end where we're a master and we're done. We're always challenging ourselves. We're always finding new ways to grow. And you all as a community really help exemplify that. So I'm tremendously grateful that you all have joined me in this whole adventure. And I look forward to many more. So thank you all. This is what we're working on today. This is a statue of David, of course, a very recognizable figure. Working on this toned paper. This is the Soho sketch paper, the gray tone paper. So it's fairly lightweight, but I really enjoy it as a medium. And kind of on the topic of what I was just saying about challenging ourselves, I think it's really helpful to shake things up in the studio, try new materials, and see what they can teach you about your own processes, your ability to manipulate the materials, how it relates to the subject, how it might inspire you to see things in a new way. So always be on the lookout for new materials. Try something new. If you're drawing along, again, this is the Soho sketch paper that I'm working on, but feel free to use whatever material you'd like. If you'd like to use charcoal, graphite, etc., go for it. I'll be working with graphite today. I've got a variety of hard and soft. I love these Cezanne pencils by Creative Mark. I've got the 5B, I've got an H, and what do I have here? A bit of a nubbins of 10B is what I got left here. So I've been using this one a lot. I really like these pencils because they have a bias towards the kind of the softer materials, but I have a range. If you're working with charcoal, I think you'll be able to achieve very similar results. I also have this white charcoal by Generals that I'll be using to bring out some of the highlights. And kind of on that note about experimenting materials, I'm kind of blending this white charcoal with the graphite, which they can sometimes not play well together, but in their I don't know, their dislike of one another, I suppose, you can create some really interesting effects. So I'm going to try to experiment with that a little bit and see how we can work things out. What else do I have? I have a blending stump, trusty blending stump, pencil extender because I have little nubbins of pencils left and I like to use them until I'm done, until they're all next to nothing. 2 erasers, my Derwent retractable eraser and my Kneaded eraser. As always, if you have any questions, comments, observations, thoughts about art making, thoughts about the drawing, I'd love to hear all about it. This is why we get together, so we can share our ideas. And so it's not just me kind of talking about what I'm doing, but it's also trying to get you all to engage with one another and share our own, again, thoughts, observations, challenges, frustrations, wins, losses in drawing as we go along. So the other kind of component to this is also that the whole point of this show is to build not only drawing skills, but see how they might translate into other media. So myself as a landscape painter, I'm finding a tremendous amount of benefit with a steady drawing habit through this show. And I find that it's making my paintings a bit more accurate, It's getting me to think about composition and process and kind of control in a very exciting and new way. So hopefully you'll find that these drawing skills will translate into whatever media you might also work in. So there you have it. Okay, if you do have any questions that you would like me to address, if you type them in all caps, it helps me to see them. And if you are new and you're wondering why people are yelling, that's why. So, okay, let's see. Well, thank you all for good comments about the book. I'm very excited, and I was really excited to share it with you all because you all have played such a big role in making that happen. So, Jackie finally got all the Faber-Castell matte graphites. All right, well, I'm excited to see how those work out. I got some new for next week. I got some new charcoals and some new stuff from General. So I've got this Primo charcoal pencil. Holy smokes, this stuff's good. I really like it. And I've got some other graphite materials that I'm working with, some water-soluble graphites that I'm excited to try out. So very excited. If you're new, love to see where you're viewing from. If you've been viewing for a while, love to see that you're all shouting out. I know some of you like to sit back and just kind of observe and join when you can, but if you are so inclined today to make it the day that you make yourself and your presence known, that's awesome. The final thing, I forgot to mention, when you're done, I pinned a link at the top of the chat for the show page for this episode, so I'd love to see your work. Share it with the community. There's been some amazing work. So I missed last week live, so we had the pre-recording of the island, and holy smokes, you guys really knocked that out of the park. Those are some really strong drawings that you shared. So thank you for doing that. Ooh, a book release party. That would be fun. Maybe when it comes out in print. So it won't be available in print until June. Oh, it feels like forever. But yes, it will be. It's available for pre-order right now. But yeah, hopefully we'll do some sort of party for it. From Cozumel, Mexico, welcome. We got people from all over, Florida, Wisconsin, Barb from Centennial. We've had a beautiful day here in Colorado, so it's great to have you. Australia, awesome. Oh, and Marty Lake, Primo is great, have it. Awesome, thank you for sharing that. If anybody else has, I don't know, favorite materials that you love, love to hear those as well. Let's get to it. So I could sit and chat all day long, but we're here to draw. So let's get this thing going. As always, I feel like I start every session just trying to connect myself because I feel so scattered in so many ways. The preparatory drawing that I had created was a bit of a challenge, really dialing in the proportions. And so I'm going to do my best to try to get those today. It'll be really interesting to hear from you. What are your objectives? When you look at this subject, where does your mind go in terms of trying to capture it? Because we have so many things going on. Of course, we have the figure, right? We have this beautifully carved statue that really captures the human form in one of the best ways of all time, right? So that's what makes this thing so awesome, is that Michelangelo really kind of expressed everything about the human form that he had gleaned up to this point in this. So this is just a masterful expression of the human form. But also as an image, we have things like scale, we have light and shadow, we have the marble itself, we have that tactile quality. There's the expressive aspect of the pose and the face there. So I think there are many ways that you could take this, and I'll kind of talk through what's kind of resonating with me, and if there are things that about this that are maybe different, things that stand out to you, how do you want to approach it? I'd love to hear that as well. I've seen from some of you now that have actually seen the real thing, and I am more than a little jealous. I would love to see this in real life. You could see in this one, I perhaps was a little bit looser with the mark making. This was really more about kind of sketching and feeling things out rather than kind of a photographic reproduction, that approach. And I might take that approach again as well. But Again, this first one, it really was a challenge getting those proportions right, and I think that's something that I want to focus on as well for this. So in order to get me in that, that place, I'm going to start to sketch things out loosely. That H pencil's not really doing it, not showing up. So I'm just going to abandon that altogether. I'm going to go to the 5, be a little bit softer, and be a little bit more aggressive with the marks early on. Because this isn't going to be, for me, about a kind of a clean kind of reproduction of this form. This is going to be a bit more reactionary. I'm going to try to put myself in the mindset as though I were actually on location looking up at this statue. The thing that kind of stands out for me is the just again, kind of the scale of it, this look that we're looking up at the figure. Now, I posted a photo credit for this, so if you're following along and you're looking for the reference, it's in the description below. Check out more photographs by this photographer. I think they did a fantastic job. But in order to get going, I'm starting. I can feel myself kind of like already thinking about the musculature, the pose, the facial features, and that's a distraction for me. And so I am going to try to really kind of go back to my core process, which is that of trying to see this as an abstraction early on. Using this early stage and this kind of gestural approach to kind of get my head in the game, get information on the page. I need something on the page so then I can start to make specific calculations and adjustments. I can say, all right, this is too big, this is too short, too wide, narrow, etc. But I can make a declarative statement about that rather than making an observation that feels concrete in the mind, but I don't really have language for it. So sometimes being able to describe the structure, the object, whatever you're working on, can be helpful. Now, what you may be thinking at this point, if you've done any figure drawing, a common way to initiate a figure drawing is with a gesture, more of an armature as a gesture. Kind of what I call those is inside-out drawing. So you start with establishing the central axis and the pose. And that is a perfectly valid way of working, right? I think there's many ways that we can initiate a drawing. I think the common sentiment between any approach, though, is that it's laying a foundation, and then from that you need to continually adjust and kind of move around the subject. Let it evolve on the page. Let it evolve in your mind. And so at this point, it looks like just a hot mess. So we're going to go through the ugly duckling stage pretty early, I think, here. So that's been a term that I haven't used in a while, but that was a big thing early on in the series, is that we, or at least I find that my drawings will often go through what I call the ugly duckling stage, where it feels like everything is going to fall apart, that I'm not even close to making this thing look right. It's just a hot mess, and then there's this slight panic that says, uh-oh, am I going to be able to make this work? Is this going to come together? And I've learned over the years that when I have that feeling, to get excited about it and just ride through it. Because even if it does fall apart, it'll be a fun adventure, right? You're going to learn something along the way. And if you can approach those things, those moments, with a bit of humor, kind of be kind to yourself, you'll find that often what may look like a disaster has a lot of kind of potential there. There's something that you can really boost your understanding of drawing from. So again, I start to get excited when I feel like things are just falling apart. So at this stage, I'm just looking at the small thumbnail on the screen in front of me. I am just trying to not think about the fact that the marks I'm making will at some point become lips or his head. I'm trying to simply say this is a shape, react to that shape, and let things start to form on the page. And so, that when I think about drawing, this is how I would start every drawing class, is having students consider the word draw and what that really means, because we utilize, we use that term in ways other than what we're doing here. We are drawing. We are drawing. That's an act. It's, the active that we're doing, and the result of this action of drawing will be a drawing. So we're thinking about the relationship between drawing and the drawing, and how you might prioritize that. What is more on the front of your mind? Where do you want to lead this? Is it about the drawing? Is it about the experience of having made this drawing? And when we think about other ways we use that word draw, we often use it to describe the pulling out of things, or the kind of the attractive qualities. We draw water from a well, we draw blood from a vein, we draw a name from a hat. We do these things where it's about emerging. And I kind of try to keep that in the forefront of my mind while I'm working at that. I'm allowing the image to emerge. And I wanted to bring this up because that's the famous quote by Michelangelo, right? He's famous for saying the figure's there. Like, what he's actually doing is he's focusing on everything that's not the statue, right? It's there in this giant block. He's thinking about everything that he needs to remove in order for this to be the result, to be left over. And it's about releasing the figure from the confines of the stone. And I think about that when we're drawing as well. It's here somewhere. It's here somewhere. And in the action, it's emerging. And that image in our mind becomes clearer. The image on the page becomes clearer. And for me, when I got to the point of really understanding it in that way, it was very freeing, because I would put so much pressure on myself to have a complete understanding about how to draw something before I even started. And the drawings as a result would often not work out very well, because I wasn't taking the time to really understand the subject. And as a result, I try to conceive of drawing as is the way to get to a deeper understanding of the form. And in that, there are certain techniques that can be helpful that you'll learn. But at the end of the day, the ultimate goal is to come at an arrival of understanding. Okay, so we can see the kind of ghostly forms of the statue emerging on the page, and we're starting to identify specific elements. And now from this, I'm going to start to refine this. So that's one of the things that kind of came out of the series that I rolled into the book. Is the book is built on creating these 30 projects. Each project, especially there's a core set of projects that you go through, and you learn things like line, shape, value, form, texture, light, shadow, all of that stuff. You learn those things by doing specific projects. And then you build upon that by completing these other projects, going through a process similar to what I'm doing here. So starting with kind of a gestural, blurred block-in, moving into a phase of correcting proportions, and then using from there, moving into refinement and finishing and adding details and textures, things. But again, putting yourself in control of what you want to do. And I want to kind of bring that up because those are different stages that you'll go through, but you as an individual artist may find a different path forward, right? So you may be thinking about proportions much earlier than I am. Maybe you do it later, right? Maybe you think about value earlier or later, right? And however you start to kind of structure your process, there's value in that. There's also can be value in following somebody else's procedure, trying that on a little bit and see how it fits. But you just kind of know that you're going to learn all of these skills, but you will. The goal, and I think it's inevitable, is that you'll find your own path through that. All right, so I'm now at the stage of kind of correcting. The thing that I'm looking at now is really more angle sighting. And I'm using the side of the pencil a bit more because that encourages looser marks. It encourages me to not get absorbed in the details. And with the reference to the left, I'm looking at exactly what you're seeing. The screen in front of me shows me what you're seeing right now. So right below me is the small thumbnail of the reference, and I see the drawing next to it. So I'm going to spend more time looking at that now. And now this is the point at which I'm going to rely more on the indirect gaze. So what I mean by that is I might be looking at the reference image, but I'm putting my awareness on what's happening in my peripheral vision off to the side. And then when I'm looking at the drawing, I may be putting my awareness on the reference image. And so as I'm looking and trying to assess the angle here, for example, I'm locking my vision on this part of the drawing, but being aware of the movement of the pencil out of my periphery. And if you have a screen open and you have your drawing next to it, you can literally place your pencil on the angle that you're targeting and then transfer it from the digital image to your drawing, and that will give you a very direct correlation between those two. But the stage I'm at right now, again, is looking at the angles and starting to break down the figure, the gesture there. Now, while I'm doing that, I can start to make connections across the drawing, and that's also a very valuable tool. So you can use plumb lines, you can use horizontal guides. A plumb line is simply a horizontal line that you use as a guide to kind of see how the elements in your subject stack up. So if I'm looking here at this angle that represents the slope of his cheek, I can find the farthest point to the right. If I drop a line down here, I can see where it cuts through the emerging forms of the figure. And I can compare that to the reference and see, is this lining up generally where it should? If you need to double check that, you can close one eye, align the pencil with the reference, and really observe that vertical path from one key point through the figure. A horizontal guide works very similarly, but you measure horizontally. And then another thing that might be helpful for you is as you're looking at an angle, so say I'm looking at the angle, the slope of the shoulder here, you can see how it might extend and pass through that form. And in doing that, you can see what I've got here is starting to align. If I were to carry this straight through, it starts to align with that chin. When I compare that to the reference, it doesn't do that. Right? So it actually, this line here would end up over here. And now I can double check that, and I can realize that this slope is too great. All right, so then I can move that down, and I can extend this and see, all right, now it's passing through something that feels a little bit better. I can kind of double check the axis of the shoulders to make sure that that slope is generally right. again, kind of sticking with that ugly duckling stage a little bit. We're going to slowly create structure and form. I think I do need to clean things up a little bit, so I'm going to do some negative or subtractive drawing here to help with that. So starting to look at some of these shapes as abstractions. And the key thing that I have to remind myself too is to I need to be looking up at the screen. That's a more accurate depiction of my drawing than this one that's directly in front of me. Because I'm looking at it at this angle, my brain is already kind of correcting for some of the perspective distortion. And I look up at it vertically and I'm like, oh, that's very different than what I see here. So if you haven't done that already, throughout the drawing process, you might find benefit in just standing it up, setting it back and vertically, and then analyzing those proportions there. Let's see. Oh, Ania is asking, have you heard of the Charles Barks drawing course? It was used by the classical masters like Da Vinci and helped his assistants learn from to perfect the human form through repetitive art practices. That sounds very familiar, but I don't know for sure. I don't want to say I have, but I think I do know what you're talking about. I mean, that was kind of the traditional way of learning, was to kind of copy the masters, and I think there's a tremendous amount of value in creating master copies. So I'm going to have to look that up a bit more. All right, so what am I doing here? I'm going to gather my thoughts a little bit. I'm going to work the background just a touch to simply kind of gather my thoughts a little bit. So at this point, I really haven't calculated any of the measurements of the figure. And I think I need to start doing that. So I'm kind of just going by feel, layering on the angle sighting, starting to visualize plumb lines, things like that. The big thing that I need to really understand, I think, is the neck here. And I just keep working in this area for some reason, and I'm gonna try to articulate why. I don't really know, and I guess that's part of the drawing process. I'm sure there's areas that you work on in your drawing, and there's no real, it's not a conscious thing. You just find yourself working in that area. But there's something here. I feel it may perhaps is simply because it's more central to the form. But I feel like I really have to get this right, and it feels like this is a bit too wide at this point. So I'm going to bring this in. So again, going by feeling, knowing that I cannot trust those feelings, and I will have to kind of double check them. Let's see. So the other thing that I want to do is kind of look at this negative space here. If that's a term that you're not really familiar with, really the positive space is the shape that the object you're observing makes as a form. In this case, the statue right here, that's the positive space. The negative space is the shape created in the voids around that. And so I'm kind of switching back and forth between observing the line as an edge of the head, and then simultaneously trying to observe the negative space. So if you're struggling with that, one of the things that can be helpful is to try to soften your focus a little bit. Let your eyes blur, let them lose focus, and that you're more inclined to take in the whole thing. That's really kind of the goal. Is we're starting from trying to take in the whole thing, and we're gradually moving into focus here. Shema Rabi, welcome. Watching from the other side of the globe. Fantastic. I'd love to see where you're viewing from. You might have mentioned that earlier. If I did, I apologize. Samson, so happy to be here. Awesome subject. Well, thank you for that feedback. I thought it was awesome as well. Okay. Deep breath here. I think I need to do a bit of mapping. This is a little bit different for me, and I think partly because there is something that happens in the human form, and for those of you who've been with the show for a while, you may have seen me do this with portraits as well. There is kind of a shift in how we might address a portrait or a figure versus, say, a still life or a landscape. I think we're just naturally more attuned to the human form in many ways, and that can distort things in our minds. So my general process is to try to stick to what I know. Try to treat this as an abstract form, but I also know that I'm kind of fighting my biology in doing that. So at this stage, what I'm trying to do is map out these shapes. So the underside of the nose, and it's hard because it's such a small thing that I'm looking at, because I'm looking at that thumbnail that's in front of me. I do have a larger image off to my left, and I'm doing my best to ignore that, because I know that as I do, when it becomes a larger reference, I'm going to be compelled to look at the details a bit more, and it's going to distort my understanding of the kind of the form in its totality. Okay. All right. This is an interesting observation. So if I'm looking at the shape of the nose, there's that specific shadow. It's somewhat triangular. It's kind of the closest shape I can identify is that of a triangle. And if I drop a plumb line down there, from there, it looks like it should stack directly above this point. And you can see in my drawing they're a bit offset. So something needs to change. And so hopefully what you're going to observe in all of this is a struggle, a very real struggle to try to figure this out. And I know sometimes I see these master artists just hit it right out of the gate. They get the right proportions, they get the right line work. But they pull together this amazing drawing, seemingly effortless, but that hasn't been my experience for myself all the time. So hopefully, if this does become a mess and it fails miserably, that we'll walk away with some sort of understanding of the drawing process that's a little bit deeper than when we started. So kind of what I'm doing now is you can start to see that I'm indicating some of these kind of finer elements in the neck. And they're not correct right now. My main objective with them is to simply give myself more information. I need more to work with. And so I need kind of key points that I can connect across the form. And in order to, this, ultimately my goal is to place the nose, but I'm working on all this other stuff to help set the stage and help me bring this into kind of correct proportions a little bit more. Here I'm looking at, there's a slight indication of this a center line right underneath the chin. I'm feeling good about that. I'm going to find the slope of the axis here. Imagine a line running through the center of the chin and the lips here. Kind of a line running down the nose, up the length of the nose there. I got to move my hand out of the way. There we go. That's generally pretty good. So I'm kind of looking for that central axis to help with the placement of some of these forms. And then what I want to do is really kind of locate this shape, the underside of the nose. And it's a bit of a hard edge right now, and we'll go through and manipulate that, soften that a bit. And this is one of those wild things that I have a hard time really kind of wrapping my head around. As I look here, I see the side of the nose, and then I see the cheekbone that is, literally above the nose, but from this perspective, optically, it actually intersects there. So we're going to spend a lot of time, I think, on the head. And then I'm going to periodically take a break and start to indicate something here in the rest of the figure. So trying to find here, we have the clavicle there. Especially you could see that tendon in the neck that's very visible the way the light's catching it. And try to find that angle. Of course, the what's really kind of significant about the pose is the contrapposto, the kind of the tilting of the shoulders and the twist in the torso that makes this so distinctive. And then this right over here, so that hand is going to have to move entirely. Get rid of that. So this is, hopefully we're going to show what it means to really fight through a drawing, right? Because there's so much going on, and it's so easy to make this feel kind of flat or awkward. But that's all part of the drawing process. And it's one of the things that has been really inspiring to see from so many of you who are willing to share your work and say, I'm really happy with this, or this is not my strongest drawing, or I wish, here are some things that I could improve on, because that's really the nature of this whole endeavor. As if you call yourself an artist, if you don't call yourself an artist, but this endeavor to improve in your artistic ability in some way, That's just part of it, and I don't feel like we do ourselves any service when we hide those from people. So, because it's in the mistakes, it's through the mistakes that we really grow. Now, we've talked about various tools, like there's the Camera Lucida app, there's DaVinci Eye app, and there's, you can trace, use a light table that will get you those proportions more directly. But and those are all perfectly valid to use. You're the director of this whole adventure, so use the tools that you need to. And now, in this case, I want to experience the struggle, and there are some days when I just don't. And so I'm going to try to fight through this one and see how it turns out. But we'll see where it goes. That's figure drawing. So if you ever get a chance to join a figure drawing group, something that group that might meet regularly, and you can work from a live model, I think you'll find the greatest benefit in doing that versus working from a photo like this. I do think there is value in working from a photo, but if you do get a chance to join a figure drawing group or work from a live model, I highly recommend it. All right, okay. Hello, Heather. Oh, Heather's asking at the title of the book. Title of the book is See, Think, Draw. So again, I pinned that to the top of the chat. You can find the link to pre-order if you'd like. You can learn a little bit more. I posted a promo video, and you can see some sections of the book there. And Deanna saying this is a very challenging subject for me. Perspective of looking up at a face throws my head into neutral, mainly indecision. I hear you. I'm kind of in the same boat. Now, I have the benefit of having already done this drawing. So coming to this fresh is, I applaud anybody who's trying this, and I understand the challenge entirely. This is not easy, so I hope you're being kind to yourself. Your brain keeps telling you it's not right. My eyes say, yes, it is. Yes. As Greg mentioned earlier, will we be able to order signed copies of your book when it releases? I don't know, but I will see if that's possible. Give it a try. Well, that's awesome. I thank you so much for that. So, and indeed, that's awesome. You've been working from live models each week for years. That's fantastic. I'm really glad to hear that. I do miss figure drawing tremendously, and I do need to find a group that I can get to regularly, in addition to this group here, of course. But to kind of get back to Deanne, your comment there, one of the things that happens for me, and this might be common for you as well, is that there is this, as part of that ugly duckling stage, there's a point in the drawing where the shapes move from two-dimensional to three-dimensional. And in a three-dimensional understanding of an object, we understand it differently in our brains as well. So we talked about this before. There are many kind of truths to a subject that we have to address when we're drawing from life. There's the optical truth, so there's what we're seeing from this perspective. There's the shapes, there's the values, the arrangement of all of these things from this particular perspective. But then there's the literal truth. So as we were talking earlier, like there's the cheekbone that is literally going to be above the nose on the statue. But from this perspective, from the optical truth, it seems to be below, right? But our brain understands the literal truth, understands it to be above. And then there's also the kind of the symbolic truth. There's what we bring to it in our preconceptions, or kind of our emotional connection to the subject. There's what it feels like. There's what it feels like to be in the presence of this. There's what the pose feels like to us. There's the kind of the empathic response to this. We bring a lot to a subject, right? But as the drawing kind of emerges on the page, our brain can sometimes freak out and get caught in this no man's land between all of those things. And so you may be mapping out the proportions correctly, but if it's seeing it as a two-dimensional shape, not as a three-dimensional form, it can say it's wrong, right? And even though it's right, maybe it just needs a little bit more information to get to the point where your brain accepts it as now a three-dimensional object. So hopefully that makes sense, but that's the way I kind of conceive of the fundamental challenge there in trusting these marks as you're mapping things out, as you're using your angle sighting, your plumb lines, your comparative measuring, as you're going through that, there comes a point where you kind of have to trust that those marks are correct. And it may be contradicting these other layers in your vision that are saying it's incorrect, because, or maybe your brain is saying, well, this part is thinking of it as below the cheek, but until we get more information, it's gonna, once we get that additional information, it'll put it in its proper place and you'll be interpreting it correctly. That's what I love about drawing at its core, is that it shows us what really is happening in our minds. That's the saying from the book, is that marks are thoughts, and we talk about that here. Each mark we make starts as a thought, whether it's conscious or subconscious. It starts as energy in our mind, and it kind of gives us an indication of really how are we perceiving this form? How do we interpret things? Because our brain solves so many of those problems on a subconscious level without us really being aware of it. So right there, for example, I just made a mark without any sort. I have no idea why I made that mark. I just did it. It wasn't informed by anything. It was just I was distracted talking, and I'm like, I'm just going to make a mark. And then when I step back, I realized, well, that had nothing to do with what I'm actually studying. All right, so, and in this abstract shape, I'm starting to understand the form a little bit better. Just kind of comparing it to the reference. If I blur my vision, hopefully the drawing, and it looks similar. There's a correlation between what I see when I blur my vision and what I see on the page. And eventually I'll be you working from the larger scale reference here on my left. So right now, one of the other things that I want to raise right now is that working on this toned paper, my brain is calibrating to the values that I see in front of me. So now I'm seeing this that I just lifted off as kind of a lighter value than it might actually be. Okay, I need to do kind of a quick check-in. I'm going to use the nose kind of as a point of reference. And then to kind of get back to Deanne's dilemma there, is there's also, I'm missing information here that could impact how I interpret things like the nose or the lips. Right? So if I distort the shape of the head here in a way that suggests by looking at this section that maybe I'm looking across at the head, then I look at this section and it looks like I'm looking up, there'll be a conflict in that I will have to somehow reconcile. So sometimes, again, sometimes you just know, all right, the marks that I made are wrong. Sometimes, if you don't really know what is wrong with a mark, my inclination is to leave the mark until I add more information in other parts of the drawing, build more of that context, and then I can reevaluate. And it may be that the mark that I initially interpreted as incorrect is indeed incorrect. But sometimes it's simply because the relationship is thrown off between that mark and other things. That is such a big deal for our minds, is relationships. We interpret values, for example, as a relationship between them. We look at the differences between values, not a value in isolation. We don't see values objectively. We see them purely as a relationship. And we do that with everything. We do that with scale. We do that with texture. Something will look rough in the context of, relationship of something else that's smooth. We do that with color a lot. I mean, when we're observing color, the rods and the cones in our eyes, we're not just perceiving the red wavelength. We're also perceiving the red wavelength as in how it's differing from the green. How different is it from green? Right? So we're taking in so much information. Our brain is processing so much without us really consciously being aware. And through all of this process, there is kind of a bit of intuition, playing a role in this, in that I'm responding to these forms based on what I feel like I need to do next. I'm going to try to articulate when I'm making a calculated decision to see if it benefits you at all. But hopefully this isn't too scattered for you, because especially for this, it is a bit of a fight to try to figure this out. And I find myself kind of darting all over the place. There's a bit of lack of focus happening. And I'm going to own that as part of the process. It's okay. So what is standing out for me right now is that I feel like the head is tilted toward me. I'm not getting that sense of perspective out of this. Everything feels like it's coming up forward. So I need to reassess something. And I think what I need to reassess is this distance here. So if I place the nose there and I measure down to, say, this part at the jaw line, and I compare that to the vertical distance there, let me pull up the larger. Perhaps it's close. What is happening? I need to, so now I have kind of the finer resolution, the higher kind of detailed version up here on my left. So that's what I'm looking at right here. And I'm actually spending more time on the head than I anticipated, so I guess that's the way drawings go. Said that at the top of the show here, is that I think we're each gonna find something different that's driving us in this drawing. So using the kneaded eraser, what I like about it is that it allows me to shape it a bit more effectively. I'm just looking for that shape. I'm going to carry across here. If I draw a horizontal guide across the bottom, that earlobe there should align generally with the bottom of the nose. Now, with a lot of figure drawing books, you'll learn some basic proportions to look for. So if you, one of the series that I really admire is Brent Eveston's. He's a friend of mine who's got his Art and Science of Drawing series. He was with us at the art party for the 100th episode. So check that out. I think it can be a really great way to understand the human form for drawing. So, but I think there's so much value in learning from as many people as possible, learning different approaches, and letting it inform your own sensibility. I think what I need to do is, let's see, everything is so fine right now, so I erased more than I need to there. And that's the other part of drawing, is that the idea of you kind of tackling it repeatedly. So maybe you draw, you work on one section, and then you continue to address it. Trying to compare the two. This is so bright right now, it's distracting. So what I'm going to try to do is really understand this, again, abstractly as much as possible. And keep going back to that as my understanding, is the abstraction of it all. Try not to think of this as a nose that I'm working on. Try to think of it as just simply a shape. And then one of the things that one of the kind of the disservices I've made for myself here is that I'm working very small. This is about an 8 by 10, a little bit larger. When you think about the head right now, I'm working on an area that's only about 4 inches tall, and I've got a lot of information happening in there. And what just happens, though, is when you're working at a small scale, then the role of proportions and accuracy totally shifts. The larger you work, you can be off by a little bit more than when you're working on a larger scale. Oh, I gotta. Ugh. Looks like somebody decided to flood the chat with a bunch of other stuff. So let's see. Oh, I'm seeing a lot of these comments that I missed. I got flooded by somebody looking to spam things. I need to. Let's see. Gotta hide this user. Really? Okay. Sorry, that's. We don't really have that a whole lot. People causing trouble in these live streams. So that whoever's making these comments needs to. Oh, are you kidding me? Okay. I don't know how to. I don't know how to hide this. Whoever's doing this is just. Just making it a very, very distracting right now, and I don't know how to fix it. Because obviously this person has figured out a way to mess things up. I don't know. Oh, can I do that? Add a moderator. Oh, I did it. Oh, I just made Lady Hawk Leslie just made you a moderator. Awesome. Oh, this is craziness. Okay. Wow. Yeah, it's let's see. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Lady Hawk Leslie. I appreciate that. I can, and then Dita, I'll try to make you, I think I made you a moderator too. Thank you so much for doing that. This is wild. Okay. I've never had this. And if it continues, I don't know how, I don't want to end the stream because then it changes everything. But let's see. This is wild. I'm very sorry. Thank you for moderating. I guess I'm just going to try to keep going. I don't know how to fix this, and if it continues and it's just distracting too much, then we'll have to figure this out. So, unfortunately, it feels like the chat is now been hijacked. I am recording this on my end, and what I'm going to try doing is kind of editing down a version of this and then posting it. So if this just becomes craziness, I'll just keep going recording this, and I'll post another recording. I'll be doing that anyways, but yeah. All right. Now that I'm thoroughly distracted, I am surprised that in episode 122 that we're at, that this is the first time we've had this as an issue. Okay, so back to the proportions. This is kind of the downside, I think, to the approach that I have to drawing. So starting with these shapes, whereas another approach would be to kind of really build an armature for the head. In that, now I've got these shapes, and I need to adjust them and work them, but I don't really have an underlying structure. So what I'm going to do is kind of go back to that now and start to work out kind of in a linear way, try to observe the structure of the head a little bit more. So I've got my central axis kind of worked out, and I'm feeling pretty good about it. But there's something in the kind of the tilt of the head that is not really working out. And so what I'm going to do is I'm kind of mapping this line. This line here will be softer, but I want to first map it, and I feel like I keep getting it right, but it's not appearing that way. Maybe I think what I also need to do is bring up some of this shape here. I think a lot of it is really this shape in here, the shadow on the underside of the chin. I'm not seeing the chat right now. Holy smokes, did we Oh, I see Nia saying maybe close the live chat. Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Dita and Leslie, for helping with this. I'm really sorry. I think I will have to. I don't know how to close the chat while it's going on without ending the stream, and that's the part that I'm trying to figure out. Okay. I would ask this person to stop, but obviously it doesn't really. A person who's willing to do this is not a person who will be swayed by our desires for peace. So what I may do, is I may end up having to end the stream if this person continues. I don't know, how do we do that? How do we do that? Okay. I don't know how to end the chat. So if, I don't. Trisha, and can you just have subscribers only? I don't know. That's a really good. That's a really good question. I'm sorry for the distractions here. Right? we're just trying to draw, and obviously somebody needs attention. But I'm sure whoever's making this happen, if this is what they need in their lives to feel some sort of joy, I'm very sorry for that. But okay. So I'm kind of going back. Some minor adjustments that I made here that are kind of fixing it. And now this kind of goes to the idea that we are kind of finely attuned to the human form. And the slightest change to an angle, the slightest change to an expression, can have a major impact on how we interpret it. So what I actually did is, as I keep mapping out this shape and keep finding that it was generally correct. And again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier, that it's the things around it that are incorrect. And I feel like by changing this angle here, it starts to align everything else a little bit more effectively. Now, I need to spend a little bit more time, I think, on the mouth, and I'm going to try to fix some of these proportions here. Thank you all for the support through that, whatever that was, the blitz of insanity, of sadness that just came through. But I appreciate you all for helping me through that. Or helping us through that. So we'll just keep drawing. Okay. Again, I am kind of shocked that it hasn't happened more. So and there's also this element in here. So we have, kind of Deanne, to your point earlier, sometimes things look a little bit off. When I look at this shape, there's there's also information within this shadow shape that impacts the tilt of the head and that structure. And so by adding a little bit more information here where the neck and the underside of the chin connect, that is also starting to help bring this into kind of correct proportion. And then there's the eye. That eye that's in shadow. Giving myself a little bit more information might help there. We'll see if we can figure this out. But again, this is kind of part of, this is figure drawing. This is why it's really helpful to work with the figure, because it's in the problem solving where you find a lot of growth. In the human form, it's so complex that that there's so many opportunities to learn about edges and about form, about gesture. So as I look at this now, it's feeling like it's capturing that gesture a little bit more effectively. So one of the things that could have been more helpful for me early on was to try to identify that gesture, find those central axis, the axis for each of these forms, and really build out from there. Because I didn't start with that, though, you can always come back to it. Sticking to my general inclination to start with major shapes and then find the form out of that. You still can apply an awareness of those central axis and of that gesture. And again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier, that we learn all of these tools as artists, but we're going to find our own ways of navigating the process, applying those techniques, applying those skills in a way that makes sense to us. That process that we develop as artists starts to become part of your identity as an artist. So. Mary Karam, I was on full screen and missed it. That was awesome. That's a good way to do it. I have the reference image just covering over the chat for a while, so I missed a lot of that too. So, but again, thank you all for Adita and Leslie for helping with that. That's crazy. Chuck P is asking, would you consider using a grid as cheating? I would not consider it as cheating. I think there's very little value in identifying any sort of artistic process or tool as something that is cheating. Now, what I find more valuable is identifying what will advance you and what will hold you back, or what is going to help you move forward in your understanding of drawing. I've never really liked working with a grid because I find that it moves me away from really understanding the form. And there's two ways in which a grid can be used. There's visualizing it as a sequence of squares that are lining up, and then there's visualizing lines that pass through the form. So if I do use a grid, I try to default to the latter, the idea that the value in the grid is in using the lines and really observing how they pass through the shape and the forms there, and in using it as plumb lines and horizontal guides. And that, for me, that helped me to understand the form a little bit better than when using a grid as though it were really kind of an alignment of squares, moving from one square to the next, to the next, to the next. So again, it's not that grids are cheating. And I know a lot of great artists that use grids to transfer drawings and to arrive at correct proportions a bit more quickly. It's just, for me, I haven't found that it has helped me, and in a way I have to kind of fight against things a little bit more with a grid. So hopefully that makes sense. I'd love to hear more about that. I mean, I think in general with this group, I get a sense from you all that there's a kind of a similar mindset. I mean, my goal in all of this is to hopefully get as many people drawing as possible, right? So like if I ever say anything that like makes someone feel like they're be too intimidated to draw, or think that they can't draw because they're not doing it right, then I'm not moving towards my goal. And so I think whatever gets you drawing, go for it. And my goal is to simply kind of point out what my experience has been, and perhaps propose alternative perspectives that could advance your understanding in some way. Okay. So there is, I think this is where I need to really focus on, is the kind of proportions in the head here. And I feel like I'm kind of overstating his hair a bit. It's such awesome hair that I need to feel like what I've done is kind of exaggerated it a little bit, but so what I'm trying to do is, again, now I'm stepping back, trying to think about these as abstract shapes. So when I'm looking at the hair area, I'm just looking at that shape of light that's coming out. Where is it relative to this shape here? Shape the eraser a little bit. And then I think that's going to play a key role in expressing the tilt of the head, is getting that relationship between the shape here of the chin that we're really looking up underneath, and then the shape of the hair. So if we were to kind of raise up and be level with the head, that those proportions would shift significantly. So. All right, Gail, welcome. Gail, if you just joined, you missed, really a really fun blast of chat riffraff. Seems to be working out. Thank you again for all the help. Gridding can make it confusing, you're saying, Gail. You fight with them too. All right, thank you, JRW3. And Dita, oh yeah, you were a teacher. I had a sense that you were an art teacher. Joy is asking, is there any literature to understand the structure of the human body that you would recommend? Is it Loomis? I have to look that up. There are some really kind of classic art texts that talk about the human form that I think are really helpful. I mean, in the end, I think drawing from life there's really no substitute for that. I think you'll find the greatest benefit if you can work from a live model, or find, really good references, and then work from there. I do like Brent's approach to drawing in the art and science series of classes. And he has a figure drawing class on Artist Network. That's where I first met him and was introduced to his teachings, is here at Artist Network. So you might check out those classes. But then there's with figure, there's also the whole class of artists, the anatomical illustrators that are it's really an awesome art form that are designed, is using art, using drawing, using painting to kind of express that understanding of the human form. I had a good friend of mine who's an art teacher. He was kind of obsessed with Michelangelo in art school. and his figure drawings were just astounding, really good stuff. And he would do a lot of master copies of Michelangelo, of the drawings for the Sistine Chapel. And you learn so much about the human form by working from the masters. So there's, of course, the Renaissance masters, but then there's also modern masters that can be very, very enlightening. Okay, so I'm going to get into this a little bit more. Let me see, I'm going to try to zoom in just a little bit. Lady Hawk Leslie, I was an art major way back, but recently getting back into drawing. Graphite is my favorite learning colored pencil and marker drawing now on YouTube. Awesome, that is awesome. That is great to hear. And then JRW3, do I ever have time to check out other people's drawings? I do. That's something I enjoy a great amount. And you're all, for anybody who's following here, if you want to share your work when you're done, there's a link at the top of the chat that where you can share your work. All right, I had put down. I'm going to actually shift back to this H pencil. It's a little bit harder, and I abandoned it earlier because it was not very visible, and I think that will actually work to my advantage now. And so what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to kind of express the shape of the lips. And this is where my head's at right now with regards to drawing kind of a portrait, essentially, is there's this movement back and forth, this oscillation between looking at the features and then looking at the spaces between them. And it's so easy to get locked into drawing the lips, drawing the nose, but when you shift to thinking about the structure between them, it can help sometimes really lock into the correct form. So what I think I had done, I have indicated the nose here, but it's when I think about just the structure of the nose in isolation, it's taking my attention away from making sure that they're placed correctly, if that makes sense. So using this eraser, I'm kind of extracting a little bit more, cutting back into it, kind of trying to refine the shape. And then from a linear viewpoint, the value in figure drawing like this is in really understanding the subtle interactions between these curves. So we captured the overall shape of the nose, but when you look at that general angle more specifically, you realize that there's just this beautiful kind of undulation there. There's this interlocking between these curves that expresses the forms. And that you learn so much about drawing by kind of shifting into that mode of thinking. There's kind of a hardness to the edge of that nostril on the inside. Gets a little bit softer in here. So I'm going to this kind of lighter material on purpose so I can kind of sneak up on the forms a bit more. And then we're just going to keep kind of massaging the form until we get something that we're generally happy with. I think I need to indicate these nostrils a little bit. That will help me to really see the perspective of the nose more effectively. And I think I need to pull the the tip of the nose out just a little bit more. And so then when you're working with a figure like this, it's so much of it is about making these very subtle adjustments. You know, once you've got the major forms kind of mapped out, then you got to stick with it. You know, I'm thinking about the episode for next week, and we'll be working with some fabric, and a lot about what I discovered in doing the preparatory sketch. You can see it right behind me, is the realization of that there's so much value in just kind of really sticking with it. And I often find that especially in these shows, I kind of have to rush through some of these drawings a bit more. And as I sit with them, I'll, inevitably I'll look back at these drawings and think, oh, I could have adjusted that, or with time and distance from them, I become aware of ways in which I could really improve the drawings or make additional statements. And so I'm going to spend a little bit more time really trying to refine this. And it may mean that I don't have quite enough time to get the rest of the figure drawn, but hopefully it'll be enough for us to get a sense for how this process could go. I need to bring this up a little bit more here. So as I'm, you see I keep working this shape here. I'm making it too big, and then I cut it back, and then I make it too big again and cut it back. And sometimes you just have to call it and say I'm done with this. But sometimes you just keep doing that. It's like sometimes it feels like we're just drawing in sand, moving these shapes around. And then, of course, we're going to be bringing out the highlights on this. So I'm trying to be aware of these areas where there's going to be lighter values interacting with some of these darker forms to help bring out more of that form. And then with these lips, they're really interesting in looking at that structure. So if you look at this upper lip, for example, as we kind of tuck into that corner of the mouth, we see this kind of diffused shadow shape. And then we see this upper lip turning into shadow here, and it kind of has a sharper edge. And then it starts to catch the light right in here a little bit. And as we come down under here now, we can observe the changing structure of light and shadow. We see this thin sliver of light here catching on the edge of the lip. And then it kind of falls into this shadow shape. And then there's this light here. Actually, I'm going to use this eraser here to sharpen that up a little bit. And then, so now I've kind of reworked this shadow shape here a little bit to accommodate the shape that I'm seeing around the mouth. Just keep reworking those edges until we end up with something that feels a little bit more accurate. So I might let that sit for a little bit. I'm not sure if I'm really 100% happy with it, but say it's close enough for now. But again, hopefully what this is kind of showing is how to struggle. Because this has not been easy. You know, I talked about that earlier, that sense of panic at that ugly duckling stage, where you're like, is this going to come together? I have no idea. We'll see. And now I'm doing it live. So we'll see how it ultimately turns out. But you all are kind, and I feel safe making mistakes with you all. So I'm going to soften that up a little bit, and then I'm going to just do some final kind of checks. I feel like what I've done is I've made the facial features too big. And this is I notice a big difference. So right now what I can see is I see this large reference image here. I see the little one right there. And when I look at the large one, it feels like that's what I'm looking at here. When I compare it to the small one, I'm like, I feel like the nose is way too big. And perhaps it is. But that's kind of the nature of what we talked about earlier about the idea that, you know, the drawing process can reveal so much about the way your mind processes information. And I learned so much about my own, my own kind of visual biases, I suppose. The things that I kind of interpret incorrectly so easily. And I think what I had done is I had drawn the nose too large. And it's really hard, because it's so small, to determine the correct proportions. Let's see. So let's see, if I take the tip of the nose to that furrow in the brow, that gives me a measurement. And so that distance from the tip of the nose to the brow is about the same as from the tip of the nose down to the corner of the mouth. So that's about right. And I feel like I'm getting a little bit closer. I'm getting a little bit closer to accuracy with that nose. And what I love about drawing is that it is so forgiving. You know, it's sometimes with media like watercolor, for example, I tend to tighten up, and I feel like I just want to be able to erase, and it can be hard to do that, in part because I'm a less proficient watercolorist. But I do love that graphite charcoal. I can push things around. All right, let me get back to the comments here, see if there's anything. Nigel Donaldson, I'm currently drawing a lot of statue ornaments and finding it difficult working out tone, especially in bronze. Oh, that is really tricky, I imagine, when you're working with those structures, and they. I'll see if I can. I don't know if I can really contribute much to help with that, but I will have that kind of running in the back of my head, how to manage that. I'm just kind of pushing that cheekbone up a little bit. And in doing this, making those subtle adjustments to the nose, to the mouth, hopefully capturing that the structure a little bit more. This is quite tricky. Okay. I feel like what I've done is I've drawn the mouth too big, that upper lip. And now we can adjust that. Look, just slight changes. So when I'm erasing, I'm kind of aware that I'm gonna remove a larger chunk than I really need. But then I can cut back into it with my pencil. And then kind of double checking. Now I'm looking at, again, both the big one and then the small one in front of me, because they give me very different understandings of the form. Nigel, for you, when you're working with those statues, I'd be curious if you're working from life or if you're working from photographs. And if you are working from photographs, if you notice a difference when working from a small thumbnail versus a larger one. I know for a while for me, I would kind of just assume that working from a larger reference would be better because I'm getting so much more information. But I actually find that the smaller reference is more accurate in so many ways. I'm going to shift to a slightly darker. Slightly darker pencil here. Find the center of the mouth. So by looking at that smaller reference, it helps you to prioritize. It helps me prioritize, at least. It's yeah. Sorry, just focusing a little bit and kind of intently. Squinting does the kind of a very similar thing. By removing some of those details, you can see the shape a little bit more accurately. So this is, some of the struggles that I would go through in the book as well. When working with these projects, sometimes you just encounter something that you really struggle with, and hopefully that's conveyed in there, that it's about finding a process, finding your own way through it. Kind of show how I break down the subjects. But I'm feeling better about kind of that look now. I think shrinking the nose seems to have been something of value. And kind of going back and forth between the large image and the small one. And again, if you're interested, at the top of the chat, I pinned a link to my book that was just now released for pre-order on Amazon. It's called See, Think, Draw. It was a lot of fun to work with. Okay, so I'm going to stick with this for now. You can see that this is still largely undefined, but I just said I'm going to stick with this, but I'm kind of thinking through that in the back of my head. One of the things I need to address is I do need to get this hand kind of identified. so when I was in school in Baltimore, we used to go to the Walters Art Museum and draw from the marble statues there. That was so much fun. And I just realizing, as that was coming out of my mouth, I imagine, people who don't spend a whole lot of time drawing, which I hope there are very few. Like I'd be curious to hear how that sounds. Like the idea of sitting in front of a marble statue for an entire day, drawing it in charcoal or graphite. It just sounds like heaven to me. And I can imagine for somebody who doesn't find that enjoyable, that it sounds really odd to say that. But it's true. So now kind of just working through the hand. As I'm doing that, I think one of the things that's valuable is being able to kind of check back and forth. So as I'm working my way down the hand, doing quick check-ins. Where am I relative to other landmarks in the image here? So as I work down, I'm working on the wrist now, doing a quick check-in to see where am I at relative to other features. And I'm going to try to indicate that as much as I can as I go through this. So that, did I get that hand right? Let's see. So the hand, the width of the hand is about the same as the width of really the jawline. So I feel like I've made that hand perhaps a little bit too large. So if I take that, I take that, what that distance here from the length of the jaw should equal the length from this knuckle to the wrist. So that means that wrist really comes in way over here. And so that's the kind of the value in being able to step back a little bit in the drawing. So if we stay focused, if I had stayed focused on that hand and just really focus on the shape, that comes at the expense of understanding the overall form and the totality of the scene. There's a loss in that when I come into focus, and that's what you saw me do right there. I was working on the shape. And as I'm thinking about those forms, I'm thinking, yeah, I got the shape of that knuckle just right. Really liking the shape of the back of the hand. I'm feeling really confident about that. But then when I step back, I realize, oh, wow, all of that focus and those good feelings about the shape came at the expense of understanding how the shape of the hand, the scale of the hand relates to the head. And that is huge, right? And so take time to really always be stepping back. Let's see, the width here. Yeah, this is something I think I made that hand too large. How do I fix that? Okay. So now the downside to this whole process is that, I I kind of loosely mapped out the form. Right? You saw me create the gesture, and I had everything accounted for. Then I got locked in on drawing the head, and now it's not all going to fit. So I need to then, now I'm confronted with two options. I can either redo everything here and shrink it down, or I can just let it go. And I'm just going to let it go because we're coming up on 2 hours and I don't have time to fix it. But hopefully what that does is it kind of shows you the value in that initial gesture and focusing on those fundamental proportions. And I think typically that's something that I spend more time doing But I ignored that a little bit. So what I need to do is actually make this a little bit larger. This shoulder comes out a little bit more. I need to adjust the scale of the hands and go from there. So you saw a really fundamental mistake play out over the last hour and 45 minutes. But that's why we do this, right? That's why we challenge ourselves. This isn't about making a perfect drawing. It's about having a drawing experience that in some way advances my skills, all right? So I've got now this experience of messing up in front of you all, and that teaches me something about this process that I had known, but that's what practice is all about, right? There's so many things to think about when you're drawing, so many things to prioritize, but we can't. We can kind of expect perfection, but we can aim for it. And to me, the value, what I'm trying to perfect is a process. Is a mindset about drawing. And a drawing, as you've heard me mention before, a drawing is a record of the experience of drawing, of having drawn, and in this case, what this will be a record of is that evolution. Hopefully there's evidence on here of the messiness of these early mistakes and corrections and assumptions that have been challenged. That to me makes it more exciting as a piece of art. I enjoy viewing the sketches of great masters versus the finished pieces. We look at Leonardo, for example. There is the Mona Lisa, which is an amazing work, of course, but to me, what I find more exciting are the sketches where you see the evolution, the thinking behind all of these ideas, the working out of ideas. It's the same with Sargent. If you've seen his paintings, you can be wowed by the proficiency, the mastery of the brushwork. But then when you look at the drawings, there's something that just it's a punch in the gut when I look at the drawings of Sargent. And part of it is to see just the work that goes into studying a form. And he's definitely somebody who could have become very formulaic. In some cases, it was formulaic, and that just like every artist, we're going to fall into habits. But it's with the drawings where you see this attention and this dedication to really solving problems on the page. All right, I'm going to try to figure out, I'm going to compare the height of the head to the length of the arm and see what I can figure out. 1, 2, is that 2? Just about. So what I'm measuring here is this height here, the height from that notch where the jawline meets the neck to the top of the head is equal to just about twice the arm. So that means that this arm is going to run off the page here. So that's good to know. I'm just going to let it go. I'm not going to try to fight it to fit in there. Because it goes back to what I was saying earlier. We're kind of balancing the positive and negative space. If I look at the negative space, I'm like, oh, I should be drawing the elbow down in here. It's got to fit in there, but it's not going to fit. Let me zoom back out a little bit, catch that. There we go. see. Looking at the shape of the hand here. Do some subtractive drawing here, subtractive mark making. If anybody's new, I want to welcome you. If you're just joining us, what you're watching is Drawing Together with Artists Network. My name's Scott Maier. We do this every Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern, and we draw together because drawing is, I don't know, what is drawing? What is drawing to you guys? I talk about that a lot, I guess. You know, we philosophize a little bit about how valuable drawing is. I mean, to me, drawing is an incredibly valuable human pursuit. I think everybody should draw, whether you call yourself an artist or not. But I don't want to tell people what to do. Hopefully I can encourage people to consider drawing as a way to understand yourselves better, understand the subject, things around you in our world. There's so much value in it to me that I want to share that goes far beyond simply a means to make an image. It's something that is deeply human. And I love that they can be evidence of the thinking mind that goes into creating them. Just need to drop that into shadow. Just checking some angle sighting of the arms here. I'm going to try to think through the shape of the torso. There's really that tilt so that you can see the pectoral muscles very clearly. But we're also looking, or kind of glancing across them. And so that actually shortens them. I have a feeling, my instinct is to make them bigger, taller than I can actually see. I'm using the light to my advantage a little bit, trying to indicate the light that falls on here to help highlight the form a bit. And we're going to be bringing out the white charcoal in just a bit. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to try to sculpt with the eraser a little bit. I'm trying to be thinking about the form, the way the light falls on the form, the way the form wraps around, has this volumetric expression. And I apologize for ignoring the chat right now while I focus on this, but I'll get back to it. If you do have any questions, observations, comments, concerns, that's what the chat's for. So I'm getting just a little bit looser and sketchier in this because I do have to get going pretty soon, and hopefully what we're showing here is enough to kind of get you going. I'm going to let this be a little bit looser because I kind of like the idea of making this sketch be about the head more. But I do want to kind of capture that the way the light is falling on this arm a little bit more. So what I'm looking at is that thin sliver of light there. Let's see if I can loosely indicate it. Try to understand the structure of that hand, that twist to the arm. One of the things that figure drawing I think it can also do is, because the figure is such a complex form, you can learn a lot about the direction of marks and how valuable that can be. So what I'm looking at are the cross contour information. So if that's not a term you're familiar with, when I'm talking about contour, I'm talking about lines that represent the outer edge of an object. But then there's also cross-contour information. There's marks within the outer edges that indicate its three-dimensional structure as well. And so we think about here, for example, the way that hand really is more cylindrical than my initial impression. There's this quality of these lines that really wrap around there. And so I'm using that to help direct the direction of my marks. And there's this little indication of light catching on that. There we go. I'm going to erase some of the light there. So I'm reacting very quickly to this. And it's easier to react to it quickly because I have enough of the form established. Sometimes it's hard to kind of keep things loose until you've really kind of locked in on the overall structure of the rest of the form. All right, so with, now I'm going to move into adding highlights using the white charcoal. And I'm going to lift off some areas with the kneaded eraser, areas where I think the white is going to be added. Kind of softening the form, using it to sculpt a little bit. And so as I'm doing that, I'm trying to visualize this as being essentially three-dimensional. What shape would this take? If this were a three-dimensional form, what would the path look like for me to, you know, if I were to kind of be moving over that form? I do want to kind of indicate here a little bit more of that torso. I think that's going to, again, I'm kind of thinking about the white, but as I'm working through it, I'm trying to set that stage and need a little bit more information, I think. All right. Got to move around. There's a bit of glare on here, so that may be something you're encountering as well. So kind of stand your drawing up, look at it in different lighting conditions. So I'm going to go through here and take note of where the highlights are. I'm going to start up here. And I don't know as if there's a particular reason. I just feel like starting here. So I know there's going to be a highlight here along the nose. And so generally the brightest highlights are going to happen at the turns, right? Where, you know, there's the bridge of the nose, there's a sharp front, and then it turns down the side. And where that turn is happening is where the strongest highlight is going to be. And then right in here, there's another turn that's catching the light a little bit more. And now, so there are kind of two ways to think about hatching as you're shading or you're building up these areas of value, in this case adding the white. There's dimensional hatching, so kind of following along the cross contour. And then there's parallel hatching. So there's the idea that you see this a lot in Leonardo's work, you know, building up layers of your marks that are all moving parallel to one another, but it may be different than the actual direction or the plane of the surface there, the cross contour. And I often do kind of a hybrid of that. I'll kind of do a combination of the two. So if I'm thinking here, there's an angle, there's a slope to that cheekbone, so I might try to direct my marks to support that. Or maybe I'll create kind of a wash. I'll do a whole kind of flood of value to lighten up a whole area by moving marks in one direction. And there's what I'm trying to pay attention to are where the edges are the sharpest, and trying to bring clarity to those forms. And what I'm noticing is that the graphite is inhibiting the ability for the white charcoal to kind of stick to the page. So it's just a little bit harder for it to stick to the page with a layer of graphite. So I'll lift it with the eraser first, and then drop in some of those highlights. And I'm making kind of little notes, moving around to another spot, making other notes. Moving, and just keep kind of building up these areas of light. And then if you're very light with the touch, you can use the white charcoal to sharpen up an area without it competing. So like right in this area, if I'm just trying to sharpen up that edge, I can just do a light touch on that area, and it'll kind of crisp up that edge without kind of popping off. I don't want this side to come forward. This is the area the lightest light, and that's what helps make that understandable more as a three-dimensional form, because this light area advances more. So right in there, I was trying to lay in some of the white, but it's not sticking because of the graphite underneath it. But if we let them mix a little bit, it can do some fun things. Drop in some light for the hair there. And so hopefully this is giving you a sense for how this could continue to evolve, but I have to actually head out in a little bit. I know we're coming up on 2 hours, which is generally our limit. We're over 2 hours now. I try to keep these to under 2 hours. Hopefully this is giving you something to think about. So I'm going to check the chat a little bit. We got disrupted there by the riffraff. Made for an exciting day. Tammy is saying, drawing is time consuming. Definitely therapy is what I'm hearing from a lot of people about what drawing is. Will it be, Nia's asking, will the book be available for Kindle? I don't know, actually. It's a good question. I will ask my publisher about that. Gail is saying, on every drawing there's a learning curve. I'm one who loves the art journey of the never-ending learning. That's what creating is for me. That is awesome. Well said. I love it. Thank you, Mad Moments Go, and those of you who pre-ordered. That was I feel very honored. Again, I can't thank you all enough for that. Let's see. Can we learn to, Alina is asking, can we learn to draw more famous artwork or sculptures in the future? I'd love to learn how to draw a Rembrandt or a Mona Lisa. That is a really good, doing a master copy I think would be a really valuable thing. So I'm glad you mentioned that, Nia. I will put that on the list of things for us to work on. I think master copies are so valuable. Yeah, we haven't really done them. Have we done any? I hope we've done some, but I can't think if we've done anything. That's a shame. We need to do a master copy. I do have to worry about the reference images and just copyright and things like that. So whatever I find just needs to be an image that is in the public domain. So I'm just capturing a little bit of light there to hopefully kind of express the turn in the body, the lifting of the chest. Leaving this area open a little bit to kind of express that shadow being cast by the sling there. Oh, and then I do want to get a little bit of light there. And then light here down that hand. I don't think I'm going to go any farther than that, just to keep the focal point up here. Keep things a little bit loose. So not quite as finished. I think I spent, perhaps I was able to get through this a little bit more. So you can again see the kind of the initial attempt that I made. I don't know, there's something awkward about that. There's something awkward about this one too. But that's drawing, right? I'm just kind of examining the drawing and I'm like, oh, there's some things that I would like to improve upon. But I don't think for 2 hours, I think we learned a lot. And I think I'll try to keep working on this. I hope this is a good subject for you. I want to thank you all for joining me. I want to take a little bit of time to get back to these questions. Yeah, I don't think we have done any master copies. Lady Yock Leslie, when will your book be out? So it'll be available in print in June. I don't know the specific day, but if you follow the link that I pinned at the top of the chat, it'll say when it'll be available in print, some week in June. I will try to do more pencil sketching. Okay, let's see. All right, Emma, thank you for the positive feedback. Thank you everybody for the positive feedback. Dita, this one is better. I thank you for saying that. I question how this turns out. I'm too close to this right now. I need to go clear my head. I'll come back tomorrow and look at this, and it'll look very different. But that's the nature of all art. There's so many times when I've done a painting or a drawing, been really happy with it, set it up, and I realized that there are just some major issues, and it's very humbling. But at the same time, there are some times that I'll do a work on a painting or a drawing, and I'll just be fighting against it. I'll think it's horrible, and I really but I try to be kind to myself. Come back to the next day and realize, oh, there's more here than I might have given myself credit for in the beginning. So I hope that's the case with you as well. I hope you're happy with your drawing, not just the drawing, but with the whole drawing experience, because that's what this is all about. All right, thank you all. I look forward to meeting you next week. Again, we're working on that drawing over there, the fabric. It's a little small right now, but that's what we'll be working on for next week. I will try to put on the list more of these master copy type drawings. Have a great week. Thank you again. Thank you for Leslie and Dita for helping me with the challenging chat experience. And thank you for sticking with me through that. All right, have a great week.